Good morning, everybody. Are you enjoying your breakfast, or did you enjoy your breakfast? Yeah, it was pretty good. I want to take a moment again to acknowledge a lot of folks who made today's breakfast amazing. And I have a list here, so hang tight a minute. First, let's thank Esperanza, who puts out the stuff for us every Sunday after the service. She's the one who puts all our tables out. We have Esperanza, Jorge, who does a whole lot of the work on this campus, Erica, and our tireless administrator, Amalia, who coordinated and prepared all of this food. We also need to thank the Pasadena Lapidary Society, who provided all the decorations and centerpieces. And let's acknowledge one more time Scout Troop 141 and Pack 143 and the Scoutmasters and parents who made this all possible. They have been working tirelessly all morning. And although they may not hear us now, we're going to be online and it'll get back to them, I know. But everybody worked so gosh darn hard to put this together. Amalia told me that they had originally expected 5 scouts, and there were over 20 people that showed up from those troops to help out. As a scout mama, that makes me very happy to see. It's a very cool thing. Now, some of you may have noticed a letter D inked on some of the things on the table, or a little card that says Deanna in your centerpieces. You see it? There's one here. Deanna Ramirez, she was responsible for making the pancakes and all the food for many years here. And she recently made her transition. And I knew that today wouldn't be the same without her. So I wanted to make sure that she was here with us in some way. And I know that if she can hear us, she knows that we love her very, very much. Today will never be the same without her, and we're going to keep recognizing her every single year, gosh darn it. Okay, so now to the reason that I am up here in front of you right now. The whole reason that I do this each week. I have to admit that, like last week, I thought about going in a different direction with today's talk. These last few weeks have been all about facing our fears, not only facing them, but understanding the many ways that those fears have shaped our lives and the ways that we respond to things happening around us. But all of that focus on fear and, let's call it, not so great behavior, it doesn't seem very Christmassy, does it? No, not so much. And so on this special morning of pancakes and community, I thought that maybe I should head towards something more lighthearted and jolly. But then I realized that if I shift everything in a different direction this week, we will still be focused on fear the week of Christmas. And that definitely will not do. So we are staying the course, and we're facing more fears today. And in case the sermon title has any of you a little bit worried, I assure you that the pancakes do not contain dragons. The reason it was in the sausage. No dragons were involved in the food. The reason I called it that is because we've been examining our fears through the lens of Jose Stevens in his book, Transforming Your Dragons, Turning Fear Patterns into Personal Power. He says that our fears take the forms of 7 distinct and different dragons, and those are arrogance, self-deprecation, impatience, martyrdom, greed, self-destruction, and stubbornness. And he describes those dragons as living inside of us, stealing our beautiful, divinely given life energy. And we may have more than one dragon inside of us, and perhaps some are bigger or smaller, but regardless of which or how big, the idea is that when we understand them, we can work together to conquer them. We can work individually and with trusted, helpful people like therapists and counselors. This is very important, and he doesn't stress that nearly enough in this book. But some of these dragons are fierce. And in order to safely navigate them, it's really, really important to have a good support team behind you. But another really cool thing about his dragon approach is that it allows us to be able to see and understand the reasons for those dragon fear patterns and behaviors in others, so that we can respond in a compassionate, judgment-free way. And when we respond compassionately, we begin to create change, not just for the people that we encounter, but for the world. Because when we consistently shift our response to love, others see it, and they begin to respond in the same way. So far, we have taken a dive into the dragons of arrogance and self-deprecation. And last week, we looked at the dragons of impatience and martyrdom. I'm going to move this forward because I feel like I am standing right up on this. So I'm going to do this a little bit so I can back up. So we looked at impatience and martyrdom last week. And what we've been able to see so far is that each pair of those dragons, there's a reason we're doing them in twos, each pair are different sides of the same coin. Each of those dragons started as a belief that somehow, for some reason, the person is not enough, that they're not lovable, that they're not good the way that they are. And each individual's response to that singular belief is what determined whether or not they built a nest for a dragon and which dragon we hatched, so to speak. So, and the fear of not being lovable or good enough is at the very heart of every one of these dragons. So we all have that fear somewhere in us if we are struggling. So before we move forward, let me once again state a few facts. And these are facts. Hear me. You are enough. You are, in fact, so much more than enough. And you always have been. If you have been made to feel like you are anything less than amazing and wonderful and beloved, know that I see you. And I know those things about you. And that goes for everyone watching online too. I don't have to see your face to know that you're incredible. You are, without exception, breathtakingly amazing and absolutely beloved. So hear that, know that, and hold on to that as we look at our next two dragons, both of which come from a fear of abandonment. If you remember, each of these dragons has several sets of 7 steps to help us work through them. There's 7 explanations of how they came to be, 7 affirmations, 7 weapons, and 7 exercises to overcome them. And the whole concept for each starts off with the dragon's positives and negatives, as well as its outward and inward manifestation. But I'm going to preface this today by letting you know in advance that the dragons we're looking at this morning are tough. This is really heavy stuff. And again, I am so glad that most of you finished eating already. I am doing my best to keep it as light as possible, but there is only so much I can do without sacrificing the important part of this, which is overcoming the fear that led to them. So the dragon of greed, it's positive pole, like a battery, remember, positive and negative. So you've got the positive and the negative, top and bottom. So its positive is appetite, and its negative is voracity. Externally, on the outside, it may appear as someone who is, and some of the ones he lists here, I will note, they're not areas that I think should be addressed here. Okay? So I'm not going to go there. I also happen to disagree with several of these appearances that he lists because the very same characteristics can apply to most of these. So if you want to look at the whole list, we have several gently used copies of the book in the store. And although I won't be officially opening the store today, if you want a copy, I can open up quickly before the meeting and you can come in and buy one. So a person hosting this greed dragon, they may appear on the outside to be selfish, hoarding, depriving of others, possessive, stingy, unquenchable, tight-fisted, mercenary, covetous, or materialistic. That's not flattering at all, is it? Not even a little bit. But internally, these people may feel deprived, unsatisfied, empty, insatiable, envious, or fearful of losing out. And I love in this book that for most of the dragons, he includes a section to help us all get a sense of what it might feel like to be someone who's dealing with each dragon. And it kind of opens up that channel for compassion when we take a minute to step into what that might feel like. He says on page 226, to get a sense of what greed feels like, imagine that you've been in the hot sun in the desert without water and you're parched. As you crest a sand dune, you see a beautiful oasis with palms and a fresh water pond in front of you. Before you dash down and drink, what is the look on your face? What do you feel like? Now, imagine that a thick glass window separates you from the water. How do you feel now? What is the expression on your face now? How would you relate to other people from this perspective? He says that the greed dragon has two faces. One face is exemplified by insatiability. People who want everything for themselves. They help themselves to more than they need at everyone else's expense. But the other face is exemplified by deprived behaviors. People who appear tight-fisted and who, as a result, live without the pleasure of anything. They close off. But the 7 steps of development for this greed dragon are: step 1, abandonment and deprivation fuel a child's hunger. He says, deprivation is firmly implanted in early childhood. I'm hungry, I'm starving, I've got to have it. This is the intense feeling inside these children as their experience of deprivation of food and or affection becomes a way of life. So the child makes the belief and decision, life is about wanting relief desperately. And as a parent, that made sense to me. How many of you know a little one who went through a phase of mine? It's mine. Right? All 3 of my sons went through it, and I imagine that we all did as well. It's mine. And I imagine that what sets the average toddler's mine phase apart from those who build a nest for the greed dragon is perhaps when they said mine, whether it applied to an object or a person or affection or even sustenance, someone continually took whatever it was away from them. They denied them of this perceived need, so they seldom got to actually have a mine that really was theirs. And it kind of hurts my heart to think about that. So before I get stuck in that hurt, let's move on. Step 2, in the development of this dragon, the child accepts substitutes for affection. After long waits, the child becomes aware that after things are refused, substitutions are being offered. At first, they refuse to accept those, but as that hunger for affection and food and stimulation mounts, the substitutes are eventually accepted, and they develop the belief the real thing is never going to come along. I'll take what I can get and pretend to like it. Step 3, desire for the substitutes takes over. Fixation occurs and collecting begins. The belief becomes, by collecting and hoarding this, I will never hunger for it again. Acquiring it is a relief. Step 4, the child begins to feel entitled to the substitutes, and they blame others when the substitutes don't satisfy. The child begins to feel that the world owes them what they're looking for. To them, it seems entirely reasonable to demand or grab. The belief becomes, I have a right to what I'm missing, and I don't care who pays as long as I get it. It's their fault, and I'm hungry for it. Step 5, acquiring the substitutes reminds the child of deprivation. Acquiring then results in pain. They begin to believe whatever I get, I won't like. It isn't the real thing. I need another one. Step 6, the child begins to focus on what is missing rather than what is available. This step is the development of that grass is always greener mentality. Okay, it is also the source of the emotion of envy. The belief becomes whatever I have is not what I want. Other people have what I want. I'll have to take it. And step 7, the missing objects, that missing thing that they're desiring is never found. So panic sets in and then despair. And no matter how hard people with the greed dragon look or hoard or possess or take or want or wish, they don't get what they want to fill the hole. Yet the greed dragon would have other people believe that they need these objects. Underneath the surface denial, a horrible truth keeps trying to penetrate the awareness of these people. My efforts are truly hopeless. The substitutes are useless. The external world will never fill my needs. And just a quick tangent from Jose Stevens' narrative to look at that truth. The external world will never truly fill our needs. That is why we come to places like this, to touch into that divinity that we know exists in everything, within and without. Jesus said, nor can one say, lo, it is here, or lo, it is there, for the kingdom of heaven is within you. Remember that as you're examining what you're hearing about these dragons in light of your life. Do not judge yourselves or others as we unpack all of this. You are not your dragons. Nobody is. You are all incredible and wonderful in ways that you don't even realize. The rest is just noise, okay? Now back to the book. He says on page 239, the greed dragon wants people to believe that just one more of anything will bring a feeling of satisfaction, but that satisfaction is never met. So the greed dragon thrives. The greed dragon produces the deprivation that fueled it in the first place. But there are 7 weapons to transform the dragon of greed, and they are first, number 1, acknowledge that greed is a problem and get help, right? Acknowledge that there's a problem and get help. Create plans to end greed now. The first major weapon in your fight against any dragon, any battle in your life, is to become aware of it as your enemy, right? Acknowledging and targeting greed as a major player in your life will help you understand the entire structure of your process. Step 2, weapon 2, recognize your greed dragon's fixation on substitutes. What is it that you crave? Is it something you physically consume? Is it possessions? Do you want more influence over the world, more power and dominance? Do you want everyone to adore you? Figure out what these things are that you are after, right? And then recognize what those things are substitutes for. Okay, weapon 3, end the search. Surrender. Face your feelings of despair. He says on page 255, this weapon is hard to pick up and even harder to use. Tremendous strength and courage are needed to face the fact that whatever it is you're craving, it simply is not the answer. Okay? Weapon 4, recognize your true source of satisfaction. Identify what is behind whatever that craving or fixation is. Remember that that craving is a substitute for something you actually need to address. 5, learn to give to others. Give up blame and take responsibility for your life. And I don't think I need to explain that one much, right? It means get real with yourself and others. Allow yourself to feel vulnerable. I know it's scary, but it's really important. Allow yourself to feel vulnerable and then give back. Learn to give rather than acquire. 6, be generous with yourself. And again, that's true of all these dragons. It's true of life in general. Be kind and generous with yourself. If you're struggling to find ways to be kind to you, let's talk. Okay, we can figure it out together. Step 7, recognize what you already have. Enjoy your wealth. Pay attention to the haves instead of the have-nots that you used to focus on. Okay, and finally, we have 7 exercises to slay this dragon. 1, he says you must identify the object that you crave. Really get into that feeling of craving. Identify how you feel physically, what your thoughts are about it, any memories linked to it. He says, go over these in detail. These are clues to the source of your feelings. They may be upsetting and make your craving stronger for the moment. That is just your dragon getting uncomfortable with your scrutinizing. And that's a good thing, he says. Okay. Exercise 2, make a list of everything you've already accomplished, including material things, talents, relationships, abilities, and savings, and give thanks. Realize that in order to keep these things, you have to be generous with them and share them with other people. Again, that's gonna be a challenge, but it's a necessary one. 3, he says to give something nice to yourself that you've always wanted. One specific object, not a substitute. It should be something that you'll use frequently. And each time you use it, express gratitude. This is not an exercise giving permission to shop all willy-nilly, right? Or indulge in unhealthy behaviors. Just give one small but important gift to yourself in order to find real satisfaction and to know gratitude more intimately. 4, he says, make a list of everything you think you need in order to be happy. 5, make a list of all the things you won't let yourself have. He says on page 263 to please include the things you try not to let yourself have, but fail to stop yourself from having them. Include everything, frogs. Include everything that makes you feel guilty. Observe these feelings closely, observing that the guilt associated with each somehow makes you want it more. Okay, and now imagine that this forbidden thing, imagine obtaining it and consuming it or using it or having it, and then notice the feelings of remorse that follow your enjoyment of it. The remorse is one of the controls of the greed dragon, he says. It keeps the pattern going. 6, he says to closely examine the thing that you crave and get to know it. Then consume it or use it with awareness. He says your craving exists because you are unconscious about the thing you crave. And here is where I disagree pretty strongly. I will admit that this step baffles me. I don't want to devote the rest of the talk to it, but this step feels like it could prove distinctly counterintuitive in an awful lot of cases. So I will go on record and say that I largely disagree with this one. Besides cravings that can hurt or cause damage to ourselves, there are a lot of cravings one might have which might hurt others. And indulging in those, whether you mean to hurt somebody or not, are not okay. I am not going to condone consuming someone else's weaknesses as a cool thing, okay? This particular exercise feels too much like a green light for doing destructive things that can't be undone. And I don't dig that idea at all. But we're going to move on to step 7. Step 7, again, seek help from a professional. I think that sentence, again, goes without explanation. Seriously, help is available. Reach out. So we're going to move to the other side of this dragon-shaped coin. This is the dragon of self-destruction. And this one breaks my heart in so many ways. And it's one that's as difficult for me to talk about as it is for some of you to hear. And the material that he presents in his book holds a whole lot of really, really humongous triggers for a whole lot of people. So I am going to stick largely to the surface on this one. If you want to know more, again, following the service, let me know. We can go in the bookstore and you can get a copy and you can feel free to dive into that, but I'm not doing that here. So this dragon, self-destruction, its external manifestation may look like somebody who is reckless or daredevil-like, dangerous, delinquent, frantic, rampaging, wild, violent, hazardous, excessive, dejected, uncontrollable, self-harming or controlled/controlling. The internal manifestation may feel like you're out of control, hopeless, despairing, devastated, unconsolable, or feeling worthless or like everything is futile. When he describes the physical appearance of people with this dragon, after he lists a whole lot of very direct and potentially extremely triggering stuff, he notes at the end that people may hide this dragon behind professional appearances and says, and I quote, "This dragon does not lend itself to trying on for size." So I'm so glad he cleared that up. It is perfectly unfocused now. On to the 7 steps of development. 1, a child feels abandoned. His or her needs are consistently not met, and he notes that this particular dragon can begin to develop from early infancy. The belief becomes, I am all alone and the world is scary. I'm too small to fix this. Whew, this is a lot. 2, abandonment results in a loss of structure. Without primary caregivers, infants and small children's experience is that no one is in charge of their environments and no one is in charge of their bodies. They are consistently not physically cared for. The belief becomes, no one is in control, no one is in charge, I am abandoned. 3, this is so hard for me to say out loud, and I didn't think it was gonna be. Emotional and physical abuse occurs. The belief becomes, my caregiver is abusive and out of control, and I am not in control because I can't stop them. The world is a hostile place. 4, the child turns against him or herself. The belief becomes, I am bad, I should be punished. 5, the child begins to fear loss of control. The belief becomes, my parents are out of control, I am out of control, my life is threatened. 6, the child learns that gaining control is vital to survival. The belief becomes, I must be in control at all times. I must prove to myself that I have this control. I will control the abuse. And finally, and maybe most heartbreakingly, step 7. Gosh dang it, why can't I turn off my heart for like 5 whole minutes? The child no longer values his or her life. And that is all I'm going to say about that, except to note that the language that he uses is very specific and does not belong in a sermon anywhere. My mother's heart wants to gather up any child or adult who feels this way and help them see differently. I said it earlier and I say it all the time, and I mean it with every iota of me. You are precious. There is only one you. And I am so sorry if someone made you feel like you were anything but perfect. I broke my child too. He can't see me crying without crying. I want you to know that you are, and you always have been, the perfect you were meant to be. No one could ever be a better you than you. Does that makes you extraordinary, right? Seriously though, there's logic to my argument. There's only one you. There's only one of each of us. We are each incredible, equally. If someone you know doesn't believe that, help them see it. Help them know it. Know it for them until they get it. Okay, moving on before the crying gets worse. I have to note what he says on page 277. He says the dragon of self-destruction is intimately associated with the greed dragon. These two dragons have many mutual qualities, not the least of which is addiction. People who are dominated by one of these dragons often exhibit signs or symptoms of the equal opposite dragon. For example, Self-destructors often cannot control their appetite for food, drugs, power, or other states. They often live wild lives of excess in every area, only to be destroyed by that excess sooner than later. The wild excesses act as distractions from their deeper feelings of despair. So like I said, each pair of dragons is related. Somehow, next week's dragon of stubbornness stands alone. And it probably insisted on being alone and was too stubborn to persuade otherwise. But I do have to note that he says that these two dragons, they present as addiction. But I have to say, in my observation, every single dragon that we have looked at has qualities that lend themselves to addiction, because addiction helps with avoidance. Okay, I'm just going to note that is a personal thing. Now, on to the 7 weapons. 1, and this is very, very important to hear if you believe this may be your dragon, or if you know someone who you observe may have this dragon. The first very powerful weapon is to realize that life is sacred and has meaning. Everyone's life, if you or someone that you know struggles to find that truth, please reach out to someone who can help. Okay? Reach out to me, for Pete's sake. I am right here and I'm readily accessible. Weapon 2, admit that you are out of control and ask for help. Admit that there is something seriously wrong in your life and that it is too much for you to handle by yourself. You need help. It is not a personal failure to need help. Having problems is human, but it is most definitely a sign of courage to ask for help. Weapon 3, admit that being in control is a big issue. Realize that you fear losing control and that you are out of control much of the time. That's tough. You can do this. Weapon 4, set your sights on realistic goals. Learn to play and work for pleasure rather than constantly straining to prove yourself only to explode into self-destructive patterns when the tension gets too high. As a silly example, okay, let's imagine a 5th grader who sets the goal to enter the Baseball Hall of Fame 6 months from now. Okay, would you say that that's a realistic goal? No, not so much. So perhaps that same 5th grader could set the goal of signing up for a community youth team, right? That would be more realistic. That is the kind of thing that this weapon is talking about. Okay? Weapon 5, clean up the messes in your life. This means paying off debts, communicating to others, keeping appointments, and following through even when there are obstacles. 6, admit and face your abuse of yourself and others. He says you must return value to and respect your body above all else. Make it a priority to care for your body through appropriate exercise, good food, proper rest, and regular hygiene. Essential to respecting your body is facing the issue of abuse in your past and present. And just as your self-abuse must be looked at, your abuse of others must be looked at as well. This means coming to terms with the harm and pain you've inflicted on others. I know these talks are long. I do my best to condense. I'm talking quick. Weapon 7, admit and face the issue of abandonment. This is crucial. You are so important. Is it too far away? I'm too loud. Okay. I'm trying to be heard and I feel like it's going in and out. Okay. You are worth so much. Okay? Know that as you face what happened then, so that you can move forward knowing the truth of your worth. And the 7 exercises to transform this dragon, which again, I'm going to note, especially with these, should be done with the help of a counselor or a therapist or another person that you know can safely guide you through these. This is a dragon which should not be addressed lightly. None of them are, but this one is especially tough to fight. Please be safe as you move into these. Exercise 1, assess yourself. Do it daily if you have to. Check in and see where your head is. Exercise 2, make a list of your life goals. And like that ambitious 5th grader that we just talked about, make them realistic, okay? Prioritize your happiness. You deserve to truly be happy. You've always deserved it. Let's find that path. Exercise 3, make amends. People with the dragon of self-destruction tend to destroy others in their path as well. Make amends to those you feel may have been hurt in your path. Exercise 4, I'm going to back up and make a note. Make amends where doing so would not cause further harm. Okay? That is an important distinction that was left out of the book. Make amends where you know it will be helpful, not where you're going to hurt someone more by bringing it up. Okay? Exercise 4, recall your abandonment. Make a list of all the experiences of abandonment you can recall from any time in your life. Then take a look at how these experiences may have led you to push people away out of fear that they too will abandon you. Exercise 5, recall your abuse. Make a list of all your remembered experiences of abuse at the hands of others during your life. Notice how you've incorporated this abuse and how you now treat yourself with the same careless, disrespectful approach. Again, get help in these. Exercise 6, gather a support team. Make a list of all of the people and situations that contribute to your self-destructive behavior. The dragon tends to push you toward people and events that contribute to your self-destructive behavior. Your fans can be your worst enemies in this regard. Surround yourself with people and situations that promote your self-respect and affirm your life. 7, assist others. This is a late game exercise. He says to leave this one until you've demonstrated to yourself that you have silenced the dragon for a considerable length of time and have become life-affirming instead of self-destructive. Only then will this exercise truly work in your favor. And that, blessedly, is it for these dragons. Today ended up being a great deal heavier than I hoped, but I really, really did try to keep it as light as possible. If you read the book, you would understand. The truth is that some of these dragons are so big that you can't lift them without putting your back into it. The dragon of self-destruction is one of those. Remember, again, you are not your dragons. The dragons are living off of your vital life energy, draining your joy and deferring your happiness, potentially forever. So send them packing. You are not the problem. They are. Together, I know we can stop feeding our dragons and step into greatness. Next week, we conclude our series on overcoming fears, and then just in time for Christmas, we go into love. And after that, we'll keep things light by doing 5 weeks on fear. I'm sorry. Yes, anger next. It's anger, not fear, because we've done fear. Anger, that's even better. That's super light, right? But then we're moving into trust. And finally, we're surrendering into the divine. Okay? I hope that you will be here with us for those, because I know this is a lot. But the rest of those things will lead us to someplace incredible. We are the bodies that God works through. Let's dial up our potential together so that we can allow God to joyfully express through us as us. Okay? Thank you.